Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike's making fun of my, ooh,
Yes.
it's not a very soft voice.
Yes. Well, you'll get used to it.
Okay.
We were just talking about her booming voice that Mikaela carries around. Big booming voice.
Super loud.
Super loud.
Yeah.
Super loud. Well, thanks for being here, number one. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yes. It's always fun to get to interview people that you kind of know. So I quite enjoy that. But, one of the reasons why I invited you to be here tonight was, every year we do female founders. We celebrate female founders for Startup Grind, and we do it in the month of May. And the reason we do it is we're looking for founders that have did something extraordinary. They either grew their company, or they sold their company, or they've done something that matters, right? So I thought of you because you've done so well. I knew when you started it. We had coffee when she started. She's like, HR is not sexy. That was my vote of confidence for her. Like, it's not sexy.
Yeah.
You got to figure out how to make it sexy.
You did tell me that.
So I know that you've really made your company work and done extremely well. So
Thank you.
Great job at that. So I want to hear kind of things that you've done to do so well so quickly. I mean, it is pretty quick that you've gone from basically be yourself to 6+ people and revenues, whatever they are, and I want to hear some of the things like how you did it and what mistakes you made and what things you were really successful at. So,
Sure.
So give us the short version of one, just like why you started.
Yeah. So I always say there was a push and a pull. So I spent about 15 years in corporate HR, mostly at Microsoft and Amazon. And then I purposely went smaller. So I was at PopCap Games and then Redfin before going out on my own. And I think I was done with the big companies for sure. I mean, I think I learned a lot at those companies, but most of what I was learning was about scaling. And so it was about scaling HR processes, right? How do you scale an effective promotion process? How do you keep performance reviews and pay fair and transparent as you're growing really rapidly? And those were good challenges, but after 15 years, I just felt like I wanted a different challenge that wasn't only about scaling. So that was the push for me to go smaller. And the other thing, and we can talk about all the bad things about HR. I won't be offended at all, but HR can be extremely bureaucratic, and when you're in large companies, there's usually a rhythm of business, and like, hey, today is performance review time. Now it's succession planning time. And whether that's what your particular client or business needs or not, that's what they have to do when it's that time of year. And so you might be talking to a leader who says, well, what I'm really worried about is I need to figure out how to promote more people from software engineer 2 to 3. And you say, well, that's a really great topic, but right now it's succession planning time, and we have to fill out this whole succession planning spreadsheet because it's due to Jeff Bezos, right? And so I was kind of tired of that and just feeling like at times I had to cram things down people's throats versus being able to meet the immediate need. And at the same time, in 2014, I had gone off and gotten certified as an executive coach and found that I really enjoyed coaching. It's something that's extremely fulfilling. When I went to Redfin, they were kind enough to let me moonlight, so I had started a coaching business, but then the problem was that I didn't have any time. And so when I was at Redfin, as the head of HR there, I was down to one coaching client, and I just felt like it was that fork in the road, and I needed to say, I'll probably be working for 15 or 20 more years. Do I want to continue on that corporate HR path, or do I want to do something that's a little bit more flexible? And I thought, if I like coaching, I should probably start doing more of that now and get good at it. So that at some point, in my life, as I maybe wind down the business, that's something that's flexible and easy to do later on.
And in that process of deciding, whether to go or stay corporate or, go out on your own, like, did you do the Lincoln, the Abe Lincoln thing? You draw get a piece of paper, put a T, the pluses and minuses. How did you talk to your spouse, obviously, and
I kind of am like that. Like, my dad's German, so I'm really good at structured things and putting things in T's. And I Actually, we once did some team, fun exercise. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it was that much fun, but everyone had to have a balloon, and then you would go and write on the other person's balloon something you liked about them or something you had in common. Anyway, at the end, I was criticized that my balloon looked like a spreadsheet because it was extremely orderly. But I don't think, the pros and cons are very literal, I guess, and very logical, but I think what's harder and scarier is, am I going to succeed or fail? Am I going to make money? How long can I go without making a penny? Or, what if I make 1/1,000,000th of what I was making in the previous job? And I'm the wage earner in my family as well. So we have 2 kids. My husband is an artist and a preschool teacher, and you might guess that is a wonderful mission in life. It's not the highest paying mission in life necessarily. So it was scary. I think, just to be really honest. And I think that is probably most often the blocker that I see for people is the fear. Can I make it? Am I good enough? Give up what feels like security, right? The job, the paycheck, the stock options, and the benefits, which, by the way, I'll just translate back into dollars. It's like, hey, you can buy benefits. It's just money. You can buy stock in other companies. That's just dollars. And so I think that's one of the steps that I know I had to go through was just this. It's possible.
Yeah, it's possible. And failure is, it happens, right?
Yeah.
And you can get through it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes. I mean, I know that, but I wasn't really raised, probably most of us weren't really raised with failure as a thing.
Yeah.
I was talking about this earlier. I can't remember why, but I'm sure my parents are okay that I would say this, but they were the ones trying isn't good enough, right? If anyone had those parents. And so even stuff like I used to ride the bus. I grew up in Seattle. I just ride the bus everywhere. And if you got home a minute late, it was like the bus was late. Well, that's not good enough. I'm not a bus driver. I mean, I don't know what that means, but it's risky. Right? Failure, it's risky.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the first, say, 6 months to a year, did you meet your expectations? Let's just start financially, because that was obviously a big risk for you since you are the wage earner in the family. Did you meet those expectations the first 6 months?
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting. So I had to know that I could go 6 months without making any money. I had to have enough set aside that at least I was personally confident that I could do that. But then if you've ever gone to open a business bank account, they ask you what you're going to make. And I was like,
I don't know.
I don't know. I made up a number, and then I exceeded that number, so I guess that was good. But it wasn't like I had a financial plan or any particular goals.
Sure.
We had I think we had a very fortunate year 1, and so I didn't face some of the more common challenges until year 2, because what really pulled me in was a colleague who said, I have this really big piece of work, and you have to come and do it, and it's really behind, and all these things. And I was on my own, and I said, no, that's okay. That's not really me. I'm just one person. And she was very persistent. So, and it's Robin Andrulevich, who was the head of people at Juno Therapeutics. So I went and sat with Robin, and Robin's amazing, and Juno's curing cancer, and it was a really good and interesting piece of work, but it was something that required a team. So 6 months in, I made that transition and started working with Juno and pulled in a few people. And we still work with them, but a few of us were pretty dedicated to Juno for about the next 6, 9, 12 months. So I didn't have to worry about business development, really business development, lead generation. I was like, we just have this client, we have this team, and it's really great. And then I was the first person to walk away from that, and I left some team members there. And it was really only then, going into year 2, that I kind of looked around and thought, how do I actually get business in this thing? Now I have people, and that was harder.
Yeah, much harder.
I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And what have you? What's been your learning over the last year? What have you learned that actually worked?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, we have tried and experimented with every form from. We actually sent out, I think we sent out 150 cold call emails at one point, which I'm so embarrassed that we did that. And exactly one person responded, and he said, thank you so much. We actually have support from BMW, so we don't need your services. So it was Steve Banfield, who's the CEO of Reach Now. And I'm told that Steve responds to everything.
He's such a
he's
nice
so
guy.
kind.
Yeah.
So we tried that, so that was a big failure. What works? Well, our what we do at Human Resources and like coming and poking around in your business and seeing how you're treating your people and paying your people and things like that, it's pretty personal,
Sure.
I think, and it's a little bit sensitive. And so it is a very relationship-oriented business. And so there's no form of cold calling or anything like that is going to work at all. We do try to make friends, form relationships. I think participating in some community things that are just what we care about, right, that aren't a direct connection to our business. Being involved with Mike and
Sure.
Startup Grind Seattle or the Female Founders Alliance, or sometimes we'll just sponsor a girls' coding weekend. That's been a really good way to, I think it's just letting people know who we are and what we care about, and that's probably the best success we found. The other one was, if anyone knows Lee Reeves, I just call him Startup Guru because he's had all these different jobs. But Lee was kind of a biz dev community guy when I met him, and I went and had coffee, and I said, well, I don't know anything about this biz dev. I'm asking people, and he just said, give away as much as you can. Like, whatever you can do for free, give for free, and that's really been my mantra. It's the best thing I've learned so far.
Yeah. Just
Happy to take tips, though.
yeah. Where is the like, if you look back, say 2 years, what's the things that Mikaela found out that Mikaela was really bad at?
Oh.
Because running a business is different than
I
being
know.
an HR. I mean, there's
I
two different
know.
things. It's not like it's definitely not the same. So
Well, I was really bad at the whole biz dev thing.
Yeah.
I mean, first you can tell because I did all those cold call emails. What else am I bad at? I'm not bad at finance, but it's not a strength. For sure. I mean, conceptually, I get finance, but I have a fabulous finance person on the team who does all of that for us. And then I can't even help or mentor her, so we try to find other people who are good at that. Like, I really can. I'm
Sure.
in accounting. I'm useless
Yeah.
in accounting. Marlene's here. She can probably tell me what I'm bad at.
What's the thing that you will look back on and think, wow, I was much better at that than I thought I was going to be? Like, that's a surprise. It was a surprise trait to you that you just happened to figure out.
Surprise trait. These are hard questions.
Yeah, they're just things that you found out maybe you enjoyed really well, because most things people enjoy doing, they're probably pretty good at it.
Yeah. Well, I would say that I'm really pleased with the culture that we've been able to create on the team. I definitely knew what I wanted and didn't want from all the experiences that I'd had, but culture can be a really thorny thing to figure out, and we can talk about that. We see many bad things happening in company cultures right now, and I think that our culture is very simple, and it's really about kindness and high quality work and zero politics. We're a very collaborative team. People can ask for help. We treat people like grown-ups or owners. You try to hire people who are really good at what they do and just let them do it. I kind of consider that an experiment because a lot of companies don't do that. But
Sure.
in my view, it's worked extremely well.
Yeah.
And people on the team will tell us.
Yeah.
They'll tell us, like, that's why I love being part of this team. Or, Janelle said it the other day. They're just little things that bubble up for people that's how they want to be treated, and that's how they do their best work.
And what's Mikaela most proud of Uniquely HR? Like, what is the thing that you're like, wow, I'm really proud of X?
One thing I'm actually really proud of is that we have a lot of working moms on the team. So we have people who work part-time for us, and they do really good, hard, challenging work, and they work about 20 hours a week, and then they're free to be with their families and
Sure.
raise their kids. And I think it's cool because 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of those opportunities did not exist. I know in my career, I never had that opportunity. I was always working full-time except for the maternity leaves. And, I think it's cool. And I think my bet is a lot of those people, they just wouldn't be working if there wasn't a flexible part-time opportunity for them. So I think it's cool that they can be in the workforce and be with their families both.
Yeah. And do you think, where is HR going? Is it, and if you look ahead a few years, say 2 or 5 or maybe 10 years outwards, where's HR? Like, what's it going to be? Is it going to be all legal, or are you sexual harassment. I mean, it's just
no,
where's it going to go?
Yeah, it's really interesting because so I was at a WTIA event yesterday. I was at Full Contact, and there was a moment when we could just ask a question or share a problem with our table mates who were from all different industries. And the question that I asked them was, I know, there was personnel, and now we think of that as like really old school.
Sure.
And now there's HR, but the kind of the new and coming thing is people ops.
Yep.
And we've talked about this on the team. So I said, what do you think of when you think of HR? And then people said, oh, it's like going to the dentist, and oh, it's like the torture chamber. And every single person at the table said that was their impression when they hear it's the terms of HR. So that's the bad stuff, And then I think there are other things that people associate with are around bureaucracy and kind of just being an arm of leadership and all of these bad things. But then I think people are starting to make better associations with what's now being called people operations, which is all the other, that and all the other good parts of HR, like thinking about culture, thinking about inclusion, thinking about automation. I'm personally uninformed but very interested in AI and how AI can help HR in recruiting. I've heard some really good stories around that. And then the other stuff, unfortunately, won't go away. I think complaints and I hate to say harassment and investigations, but I've worked for long enough that when there are a lot of people in a company, sometimes things happen. And I don't think you can eradicate that, but I do think a lot of the training that's happening now around unconscious bias and respectful workplaces, I hope that kind of stuff will go down so that there's a lot more room for the rest. And I think there's increased transparency. Companies like Moz, where the promotion process is now handled jointly between the manager and the employee working together on a plan and working together to advocate for the promotion versus in the past and still at a lot of companies, that's a black box, right? You kind of sit there as the employee and wait for a surprise to say, did I get promoted? Did I not get promoted? I'm not sure why it happened. So I think there's a huge increase in transparency, and all of which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and do you think the I don't know a better way to say it, but the media attention around sexual harassment, I think it's a positive thing. Probably for the most part, it's positive. Is it changed 20 years from now? 20 years prior? Was it the same things happening? Just no one talked about it, or is it just like? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'm cringing. It was happening. So.
I mean, is it always been happening? It's just no one ever talked about it. It's like look the other way.
Yeah, well, okay, so now I'll give you a really long answer. Both of my parents are employment attorneys on the plaintiff's side, which means I grew up at the dinner table hearing
all the good
some
stuff.
really bad
stuff,
yeah. Really bad stuff. And I think that's part of what was in my mind, like there's just got to be a better way to do this stuff at work. I mean, people are doing crazy things out there at work. So it's been there.
Yeah.
And then I've worked in large organizations, and I don't think it's any surprise. Part of the role of HR is there are complaints, there are issues, we do investigations. Sometimes it's harassment, discrimination, theft, and other stuff. So it's definitely been going on. But that said, and I've personally been shocked by the pervasiveness of like the Harvey Weinstein issue.
Sure.
Shocked and saddened about Uber, and then last week it was Nike, and I actually got up Sunday morning and wrote an article about all of this stuff. I think Nike for some reason put me over the edge, just that it was one more, and it was one more case where HR didn't take action, and that was what was really frustrating to me, and that I'm trying to grapple with, and I'm trying to have empathy for HR people who like maybe they're not trained to do that part of the job. Maybe the claim or allegation is against their boss, and like that's kind of tricky,
Sure.
Like, how do you navigate that? Because some of these situations, it's been very senior leadership who are the perpetrators.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy place to be, and especially if you're not in a culture that is going to support you investigating, taking action. I could see as an HR professional being afraid and feeling, are they going to shoot the messenger? So stuff's gone on. Some of it's worse than even I had personally ever imagined. I do think the media attention is excellent. And I think, what you're seeing is that every day more and more people are coming out of the woodwork who previously wouldn't have spoken up. So I'm optimistic that it's a tipping point, if a very painful tipping point.
Yeah. The heads will roll as we go forward.
Heads are rolling, and they should be. I mean, and I always have to say this because a lot of companies are getting a bad rap, in the way that this is happening. And I'll name, like when I was at Microsoft, I spent most of my time supporting the Office organization that was run by Steven Sinofsky. And I never had a doubt that Steven would have our back. I did investigations there. Some were complicated. Sometimes senior, high-performing people who were buddies with whatever VPs and GMs, and they all went way back. And that didn't matter, right? That performance didn't matter in light of behaviors that were not accepted.
Sure.
And so in 7 years, I never had a question. I never felt that my job was at risk.
Sure. But
I know that there are cases where people feel that way.
Yeah. And, when we talk about, the workplace, and especially more of a startup environment, right, where, less than 50 people or less than 100 people, where is it today versus, say, even 10 years ago? Where do you think, how do you think the working environment has changed for those small teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are more aware that even if you're small and fun and informal, there's also a need for a certain degree of professionalism, and that work is work, right? And we can have a good time, but we also have to be respectful and productive. Not just the small companies are learning that. Some big companies are figuring that out as well. I think people are seeking more help. Like when we're called in to do HR work, we're getting this question more and more that is, will your consultant also act as an employee ombudsman or an employee advocate? If our employees have a complaint, can they go to your person? Is that a confidential resource for them? And the answer is yes. I would just say I don't know in the past that would have been as important as, can you help us put some policies in place or get a handbook or whatever else is going on.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been top of mind, so to speak. Yeah. And what are the things that you find enjoyable in your kind of daily world in the work outside your kids? Like what are the things like that you really like to do?
I mean, I love my job. Like this job is
do you
so
like
much
writing handbooks or what?
Fun. Yeah, I don't write many handbooks now, but the job is really fun, and I would tell people I've been doing it for 3-ish years. I've had, and now I don't remember the day, but like I remember having a bad day and just going, oh, that was a really bad day. I think it was a year in, and not that like bad hard things don't happen, but I've really had one bad day in 3 years, so that's a pretty good ratio. I like the diversity of what we do. Like, I don't know, if I think about today, we had some one-on-ones, we had a team stand-up. I went and gave a talk this afternoon, did some executive coaching, got to come here. That's a pretty fun day, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think for me, growing the business is pretty fun and exciting, and my team knows, like, I think every day I'm asking, what can we automate? What's going to break? What if we double in size? And just trying to anticipate that and get ahead. And who do we need? Like, we need more staff. We need more consultants. So the growth is pretty fun. And honestly, trying to learn how to do business development, or I actually hired like a sales coach finally. So getting help with the stuff that we don't know how to do, and also just the community. I mean, you're a great example, but the Seattle startup community. There's so many people who have been so helpful to us and so generous, and I feel like any day we can pick up the phone and find so many people who will just help out or answer a question.
Yeah, do whatever's necessary. Yeah. And is there a trend? Is there any trends that as business owners or starting businesses, as probably most people in this room are, is there any trends that we should definitely be aware of, whether it be positive or negative? What are some things hey, you better have your stuff for this or that?
Yeah.
What are trends you're going to know that obviously probably us we don't?
I mean, I think a really big positive trend, and people probably know about this at a high level, but it's the move away from the big annual performance review that nobody ever liked anyways and wasn't that effective, but which most companies have done. So the whole time we've been in business, I think there's only one company we've helped that does an annual review. They also do quarterly check-in, but every other company is going with a quarterly check-in process. Most of them don't have ratings anymore. They're very positive and forward-looking. So that's not saying like don't look back and don't learn, but I think if you're sharing some of that constructive feedback and helping people course correct and learn real time, then those check-ins get to be positive and forward-looking and asking people how they want to grow and what they want to do next. And so I love that that's become the theme. I think it's so much more fun. It's so much healthier. It's better for managers. It's better for employees. So I really like that one. Trying to think what else we're seeing in the HR space. The watch outs.
Watch out. What's that?
The watch out. Oh, you said like what to look out for.
Oh, okay.
You better do
watch
this.
Outs, okay. I like to
watch
out.
outs. No, it's
that's cool. A watch out.
We can brand that. I don't think it really changes. I mean, I think it's just the same stuff, and unfortunately, sometimes people keep making the same mistakes of like, we come to work, and all these other things that people do and say, like they don't have a place. And I try and make it really basic for people, right? We don't expect anybody to know employment law, but it's like if you don't want this to show up, in the press or on somebody's blog, or if you don't want to say it in front of your sister, mother, significant other, grandma, whoever you respect, like just don't do it at work. I think I actually think it's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most of it is. I mean, honestly.
Most of it is. Sometimes there's some nuanced stuff, but it's also everything that's in the press. There's no nuance. And I actually, this is the thing that annoys me. Because I went to a meeting and like 3 guys lined up to talk to me when they found out I was in HR. And they all said things like, well, I would have complimented your sweater, but now I can't do that. And I would have complimented your hair, but now I can't do that either. Sure. Yeah. And I was like, first of all, I'm not here to talk about my hair and my sweater, but
I like your scarf.
Thank you. See?
Yeah,
and it's like I'm not offended. I wasn't harassed. By the third guy in line, I started to get really annoyed, and I just said, I want to be really clear that nobody got fired for saying they liked someone's sweater. We know what they got fired for. It was really egregious. It was harassment and assault. It was a lot of words that we're not going to repeat,
Sure.
in this forum, and it's just not that gray. It's really not.
Yeah. And for the first-time entrepreneur starting a business, maybe their first time they hired a person. Like, that's a scary thing if you've never done it before. What if you could tell me first time I've ever hired a person, never done it before, what would the 2 or 3 things you say, Mike? Here's the things that you have to do, and here's a couple things you have to avoid. Like, don't ask their age. Like, and there's certain things like you're just not going to know intuitively unless you've read it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the thing to do is interview the person. And I don't mean have a personal conversation or a chat. Like, really interview the person, outline some questions, figure out what is the job, what are the skills, do they have those skills, to what degree. I mean, I just see a lot of people having casual conversations and kind of go, oh, yeah, I liked Mike. Like, he seemed like a really nice guy. He's done some startups. I mean, I don't know, let's hire Mike, right? Yeah. So I really think you need to interview. Have more than one person interview. And I mean, I'm doing this with a colleague right now. Even if you're a startup of one, grab a friend, a customer, an advisor, an entrepreneur who you trust, but like get multiple points of view. One, it just gets you more information. 2, that other person can be a sounding board, because you might be really desperate. You might be like, well, that person looked pretty good and he can start tomorrow, so I'm hiring. Do check references. I know sometimes people think that references won't give you any information. They will. People are human. Have a conversation and ask about strengths, ask about development areas, ask if they would rehire, would they recommend them to their best friend. I mean, just think of a few of those good questions. Yeah. What not to do. Maybe all of this is obvious to me, but you really don't want to talk about things that are not relevant to the job, because even if you're not using them as a basis to make your hiring decision, the person could believe that you had, right? Good examples are like kids, or how do you pick up kids after school? you might just be chatting, but now if I don't get the job and you give it to someone with no kids, and then I might say, well, it's like you discriminated against me because, I'm a working parent and you didn't think I could work the long hours, or you made this assumption about me that, wasn't based in fact. So just avoid that. Don't make notes about that stuff, right? Don't write down of like, oh, she drops her kids off at 8 a.m. every morning. I'm sure that people do these things, and it might be innocent, but it can get you in trouble.
Yeah. And in the workplace, is it still important to have a ping pong table in your workplace?
The ping pong table. I think I saw one over there, so.
Yeah.
There's multiple ping pong tables.
They have four ping pong tables.
So ping pong tables are awesome, and all right. Last year at Startup Week, there was a local head of people came in and gave a talk that were, perks are not your culture.
Sure.
So I think perks are really fun. Mike saw me. I was like really envying the fridges and the snacks over there, because I don't work in an office like that. And I think that those things are really fun. I just think that the culture needs to be defined first. And if you can imagine, what if the ping pong had to go away? What if the snacks had to go away? Do we still have an amazing culture? And is this still a place where people want to work and enjoy their work and have a sense of purpose and fulfillment? So if you can answer all of those questions, then I would say layer on all the perks that you want.
Yeah.
And some people aren't good at ping pong. So you might might need some other perks.
You could be a foosball or whatever. Who cares? Where do you think if you look back, say 10 years, where do you think the thing that got companies in trouble? Where was the thing that you think would have been something that could have been fixed, say 10 years ago, that would start to maybe weed this out a little? Maybe less in the media or whatever. Like, where do you think, what could we have done differently 10 years ago or 15 years ago in HR? I mean, 15 years ago, HR was like, oh, we should have an HR in the executive team. That was the big deal, right?
We're still saying that, by the way.
Yeah. So it's not that they weren't talking about it 10 or 15 years ago, but like, what are some things that maybe we could do or should have done?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had never heard the words unconscious bias 10 years ago. And there are things that happened. If I had had that language or some similar language, I think I could have helped people make better decisions. This one incident always sticks in my mind where I actually recruited for a hardware operations group, and so they needed someone with a hardware background. They wanted someone with Chinese language skills because they manufacture in China. And a woman who came through the interview process who was native Chinese and did extremely well and had the right education and the right credentials and the right language skills. And I just thought it was a slam dunk. And at the end, the feedback from the team was that, she's not passionate. And passionate meant being really extroverted, and passionate might have meant like jumping out of your chair, and displaying all of this energy. Well, she didn't display that kind of energy. I think she was just a very quiet and intense, and I thought she was extremely passionate, but I didn't have the language to get over that hurdle or to further the conversation beyond debating what is passionate. I don't know. And they didn't hire that person, and this is probably like 15 years ago, and I still think it was a mistake,
Yeah.
And so I think especially in HR and recruiting, we observe and we witness things like that, and we did not have the tools and the language to talk about them and advocate for the right decision. So I hope today we already have a lot more of that, but I do think while it's great to train everyone in things like unconscious bias, and it's not all about training, but training is a starting point. But then I think there's a special layer of training for HR, recruiting, hiring managers, where we can be even more observant. And there are tools, too, that we didn't have, like blind resume review and all of these things that are coming now that I think are exciting and will make a change for the better.
And do you think how was it maybe 5-7 years ago, everybody had to have a design person on their team early on? That was like, gotta have a design person. Like, even like if you have 3 founders, tech guy, business guy, design guy.
Yeah.
I mean, the design was really important. It actually still is, but is HR getting that? I mean, because with this media attention comes attention for the title. So do you think that's something that is happening or will happen or?
Yeah. I think we're getting closer. We help a lot of companies that are in the 15 to 25 person range, which is still pretty small. We've helped companies that are smaller than that who will just call and say, we want to get culture right, we want to get values right. We did get calls last year like, help me, I don't want to be the next Uber. What can you do for me? Yeah. And so I think the tide is turning. I don't think it's quite there. I don't know when it'll quite get as far as you're saying, but I think earlier and earlier people are trying to figure it out, and we feel like it's never too early. I heard someone said this the other day that said you have a culture whether you've defined it or not, which I thought was a really great point. Like totally once there's two of you, you have culture. You have some values, there's some culture, then you start hiring, you should really know what you're looking for and what you're not looking to bring into your organization. So I think some people can wing that and do it on the fly, and some people can do it really well. Sure. Some people recognize that they don't know how to think about and define that stuff, and then they phone a friend or get some early HR help.
Sure, phone a friend.
Phone a friend, that's us. Like, we consider ourselves phone a friend. Some people literally phone a friend.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I called my friend in HR that, used to work with me, and he's got some tips.
Yeah, totally. Or just a friend that does know HR. And as you kind of look forward in your business, like what are some things that you think are, bright spots that are kind of opportunities for you and your company? What's some things that you look at like you feel really good about this thing and this thing? Like what are those things? Well,
there are so many opportunities, and actually there are a couple things I think are really interesting right now. One is I am talking to a couple of companies that do the virtual, the ombudsman or the anonymous, harassment and complaints, because I think startups can really use that. And, when we're there, we can help them with some of that, but then we go away. I mean, we come and go, until they're ready, and then they hire their own full-time person, but there's a gap there. Or people who don't want to hire someone like us, but this may still be an issue for them. So I'm talking to a couple companies who do just that and trying to understand. What I'm really trying to understand is it's really hard to act on things that are anonymous, right? I'm in HR. I've got, this is the best, maybe it's the best one, but someone just left a flyer in the director's inbox, like where you have internal mail, and it was, like so-and-so is dealing drugs. So, okay, I'm not sure exactly what to do with that. Like, there's no evidence, there's no name on it. I'm going to go investigate if this person's dealing drugs. I don't know what to do. So I'm trying to understand. I'm sure the solutions have moved beyond that, but if you're getting anonymous complaints, how is it getting looked into and resolved effectively? What's the feedback loop to the organization to know what are the themes and trends or where they want to do better? But I'm sure there's an opportunity there, and I'm trying to figure out who's doing it really well. I am really interested in the AI for HR. So I was at an HR tech conference in Vegas, and this wasn't even the panel topic, but one of the heads of HR who works for a startup out of New York just started describing how she automated their most basic recruiting and HR processes using AI. She automated all of it for $20,000 a year, and it enabled her junior HR person to move into a more senior role. So I'm actually interviewing her about how she did that and what those tools were, because I think that's an opportunity that a lot of us could learn from. I think HR people right now know that there's something to do out there, but when I talk to at least my colleagues here, nobody's doing it yet that I can find. So I feel like those are bright spots. We're also working on our leadership development programs. You might know this, but you definitely know it because we hired your friend. For the last 2 years, we've had one person doing all of our training and leadership development, and that's the background that he comes from. But we see an opportunity to bring in people into that role with different backgrounds as well. And we're kind of opening this up to our customers next week to just say, what do you want to learn about? I mean, here's all the stuff we do. Maybe you want to learn that. That's good. Let us know. But what are some other leadership or people management topics that, maybe it's things that we haven't even thought of.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to hear what people have to say, because I think there are a million directions it can go in, and I don't really know where it's going to go.
Yeah, with leadership and just how people manage or lack thereof. Yeah. Questions, guys, if you want any questions, feel free to just interrupt. In your, I call it a cadence, but each month you probably review P&Ls or do something like that. In your cadence of business, what things have you kind of learned about the business that's been a surprise? Again, about the business side, not Mikaela, but the business. What have you learned that I always ask this because as a new business owner, you don't know things. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But once you get into this cadence, you start to understand there's these things that, oh, crap, I should know that, or I should know that, or I need to find somebody that knows that. Like, what things have been kind of in that for your business that you've liked or disliked about this kind of the monthly goings on for your business?
I mean, so I come out of these companies that are really good at using a lot of data, right? Microsoft and Amazon,
Sure.
Very data oriented. So we also do our weekly staff, and we were doing weekly metrics. Now we're doing monthly metrics. But I think I learned things. I make assumptions. Like in year one, our business was really referral driven. So I thought, oh, that's awesome. We should double referrals. This seems really obvious to me. We should double referrals. Well, referrals went down, business went up. The growth was on existing business, not referrals. So I was like, oh, that was a good learning.
Yeah.
Then that's what led me to examine, a lot of existing clients are coming back. What's the rate at which people are coming back? That was super interesting to me.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of other just business stuff. I don't know. I think I always think things can happen quicker than they do, and I tend to just think they're simple. I don't know why, they're not. Automation, this is one, we have, probably like every business, but we've got our CRM, we've got DocuSign,
Sure.
We've got QuickBooks, and then the degree to which one thing does not talk to another, absolutely drives me crazy. And I should know that as an HR person, because no HR system ever talks to the other one. I don't know why I thought just business fundamentals would work better. They don't. And so the number of kind of Google Docs that we have to manage on the side to track stuff kind of drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And we
Zapier,
always
get Zapier to talk
oh my
to each other.
gosh. Well, we have two millennials on the staff, and one of them, her tagline in life is, there's an app for that, and she'll find it.
Sure.
She found a Google app to create an intranet off your Google Drive. I didn't even know. None of us knew it existed. So now we have an intranet. It's pretty cool. But I just automation isn't as far ahead as I wish that it was.
I wish it was. Yeah. Do you think the HR community will be quick to adopt AI or things that are more automated in nature?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I'm part of a group out of the Bay Area called People Tech Partners, and they're a nonprofit, and they help provide advisors for new HR technology. So Reflective with a K, is one of the first companies that they helped, which is pretty big now. And they're the ones that brought me to that conference in Vegas. And what was really interesting was People Tech operates, they're in the Bay, they do business in New York, and I think in Austin right now. I didn't meet any other Seattleites in the entire audience. I think there were 1,000 people,
really?
And because everyone was from those other geographies. And what was really interesting was, I would say those two geographies are ahead of us in this way. First of all,
using AI.
AI and just these innovative and more cutting edge HR tools in general. Because these people would get up with amazing solutions to anything you can imagine,
Holy cow, I've never seen
to
that
recruiting, to HR systems. Yeah, and then they're, of course, they're displaying all their customers. And big companies have adopted them in the Bay. And I'm thinking, we've never heard of this stuff in Seattle. So it's actually been really fun for me to be part of that, because I feel now I'm getting to see what's cutting edge. And it's given me a different perspective on realizing, we are kind of the late adopter. And how can we bring more of that stuff here? So they're a great group. They've been bringing in a few companies a quarter to demo for some HR leaders, and they're going to come up and bring some companies in to demo at a conference we're doing in the fall. But yeah, I think we could adopt a little more quickly here.
Yeah, and just in general, right? Where is the, when speaking about that, the AI, I mean, because I just think it's really interesting of what could happen and you can kind of see it happening even with chat bots. They're doing some interesting stuff. I mean, like, do you think the humans, like us in the room, are willing to share information with a robot, chatbot?
Yeah,
AI?
well,
does it end like, I'm worried, like, Chris, would you like just share that? Would you feel comfortable doing that?
I think they just had Google just did a demo.
Yeah, I saw that
on their thing.
today.
When it gets to that point where it's a little bit more personal, heck yes, because the alternative is being stuck on a phone in perpetual hell.
Hell, yeah, exactly.
I'd rather talk to something that has some function and understanding and empathy even, which is tough.
Yeah.
To my problem in my situation, then sit there on hold for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I think there's a correlation too with anonymity as well, that feeling of anonymity and asking those questions and the lack of trust sometimes with the HR situation. I think there's a connection there that can be bridged in terms of getting the information that the team really needs in a way that anonymizes the person. I don't know. I feel like I've been in this situation.
I agree. I think what you're saying too, what people are filing
If you're talking to this, then we can, it just helps us all here.
to where people are filing complaints or not filing complaints because they're
They
not
got all the
comfortable, because it is a senior person within the organization. There's ramifications to that, whether it's within the organization or without. You get labeled, you go to another company, what happens, if I was the person that, ratted out, that person,
Yeah.
if there is a function like that, that's got some anonymity like that, yeah, I think that people would be more likely to come forward with these things long ago
Sure.
via this source, as opposed to, is it really worth what I'm going to have to deal with?
When's that going to happen?
So I think some of that is happening. So somebody wrote me on LinkedIn. I haven't had time to look at her tool, but she said she's creating an AI-based tool for handling complaints. So I'll let you know what that was.
Yeah, so it's close.
I think it's really close. And some of it's also just the routine scheduling candidates or certain steps into onboarding employees, right, that can be automated and personalized where someone isn't having to manually do all of that. At this conference, and I can't remember his name, but the founder of a company called X.AI, which is the assistants that are bots. I think you can get like Andy or Amy can be your assistant and do your scheduling for you. And he had all kinds of crazy stories like, well, what if one bot encounters another bot? Because they never get tired of having the conversation, like, what time works for you? Well, what time works for you? And he was just saying, like, because they could go for 11 hours, whereas
Sure,
human beings,
other,
after 3 fails, will pick up the phone. So that was pretty funny. But he had also done this research that, I'm not going to get his numbers right, but the unfortunate one was that a certain number of people asked out Amy, the bot.
Sure.
So she's trying to schedule your meeting and they're asking her out for drinks, so that was kind of gross.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, and I think it was 11% of people that were engaged in the scheduling process sent at least one email that was nothing but thank you, nothing but appreciation, no request, no task. So that was pretty cool. And he wanted to build in, just like you would in real life, that like, oh, if people are cordial and polite, I'm gonna, this bot is gonna be more efficient. But if you're rude, the bot might keep you waiting. So I like that. So he wanted to build in like a penalty for rudeness, which I thought was an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Or if you ask out the bot enough, it'll start asking people out while trying to schedule the meetings.
Yeah, exactly.
I know she probably needed a clever like Me Too response for being asked out when all she's trying to do is her job.
Where is the where's the efficiencies going to come from in HR? I mean, if you look at especially larger companies, they're always looking at how can we reduce headcount and increase efficiency, et cetera. Where is it coming in HR? Where is that? Is it in this AI? Is it in this?
I think a lot of it is through AI, and if you think of the big companies and even just it's all about volume, right? The number of resumes, the number of candidates that have to be scheduled, the number of new hires that need to be onboarded. And then, what a lot of companies don't do because they haven't found good solutions, are you checking in with those new hires in 30, 60, or 90 days to see actually, how's it going? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a company, they were in Techstars, there's a company called Hazel that does some management training via Slack. And so it can't do all the manager training, right? Some of it you still want to do in person, but through surveying the managers and surveying the employees, it can actually aggregate information. So now for you, Mike, I might actually know, what are Mike's strengths and what are Mike's development areas as a manager? And every so often, it'll send you a nudge through Slack, and it might be a question, a reminder, an article, but it's actually customized to your personal development need. So again, that's something that there's just nobody has the capacity to do that with a human touch in a large organization.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen. No one's in charge of that.
Exactly.
Right? What about you guys in the audience? What is the? Go ahead.
I have to use the mic.
Throw him the.
That was the coolest mic I've
toss
ever
him.
seen.
I was wondering if you had any information or suggestions or what you see in the industry as far as connecting HR systems to IT systems. For instance, being able to provision accounts directly based off of their HRIS. It's something we do, and I really love that when a new employee comes on board, they provision them in Bamboo, and automatically we get an Okta account, automatically we get a Google account, everything's automatic. Is that common? Are you seeing that? Do people see the value in that? Or are we just crazy?
Oh my gosh, I see so much value in that, but you're the first person I've heard talk about doing that. So, yeah, I mean, if Bamboo is the magic answer, we should, Bamboo is an HRIS, then we should all adopt Bamboo.
Yeah,
So we're doing the right thing then.
You're absolutely doing the right thing.
You're probably ahead of the curve a bit.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
That's the first.
Congratulations.
Definitely the first I've heard of that.
Thank you.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have a question that would piggyback on that.
Okay.
So, in my experience before this job was in the public sector, so it's for government. And one of the most cutting edge things that I saw come out of that was a gentleman that worked up basically a policy and HR company that was packaged that government agencies could just hire and import their policies, Lexapol. But one of the things that they did that was really interesting, because they had to incorporate security in their operations, because everything was in a keyboard that was owned by the city or whatever, is they incorporated their IT with these questions that were loaded based on the individual and things that they needed to check in on, survey questions about the employee. It would be required before they could log in. And so you could check off your urgent needs on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis as a way to also ensure your security. And so that the employee could, as a way of logging into their computer, instead of putting their name and password, it would have a question about either something they needed to check off on their file or something that they needed to think about in terms of if they were a new manager, or also just things like that. So that was very interesting to me, and I know that nobody is doing that, certainly in the government, because that's why they're paying this man to do that for them. But I was wondering if there was anything like that going on, but I guess your question kind of answered that, is that it's not enough.
Yeah, Mikaela, have you heard that? Any?
No.
No, I love that.
I've never seen that. I know the
It's a gamification of
yeah, it is.
getting your HR.
Yeah, it was really
It is.
interesting. And then the other thing that I noticed that government agencies are doing a lot more of is the idea of a personal history statement. And I don't know if that's something, and that's just me being curious. Like, I'm not, I just work here in the building, so that's why I came tonight.
I just work here. That's
Yeah,
why.
I just work here, but I do love Bamboo, and I love Reflective, so there you go. But I was wondering if there's anything that private sector is doing in that way, where you would have that kind of connection between those things. So.
Can you say more about what is that personal history statement? What is that about?
So it's a part of hiring practices. So obviously on the city side, they have a lot more like expose and liability when they hire the wrong person and can like tank everything. I mean, maybe not all the more, but in my experience, right? So this personal history statement is something that ties them to what they've said in the beginning of the process about their life, about what things that they did. The background is a lot more extensive to become, let's say, a police officer or a records clerk for something like that. So it's involved in that background check, but it's something that basically puts them on paper for saying these things about themselves. And then if it's not true, it's almost like this thing that they can use.
Like you lied in your application process?
Yes.
I have not heard of that
And
in the
it's-
private sector.
Yeah, exactly. And things like that, you don't want them to come burn you later. And so I didn't know if that was something that's happened in the private sector, but I know that in the public and government, they've used these pretty strictly.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that, but I do think, the resume, I believe, is slowly going away, right? Like sometimes now you're just using someone's LinkedIn profile, or there are a lot of people trying to create platforms where, like I met one woman, is her platform she's hoping is it'll be a combination of a short video, and then maybe there's some kind of assessment, a styles assessment or a personality type or whatever that would accompany it. And like that would be the whole story, and then you decide if you want to meet that candidate or not. Because I think there's such a shortcoming, because the resume always looks good, right? I mean, that's why you call the person, and then
Who in this room has used a resume in the last year? I guess who's looked for a job? Have you?
I have, but I haven't used a resume.
You haven't used a resume, right? Resume? You resume?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
It's just like, and even when you look on another side, like just that job description and stuff, doesn't really tell the whole story. What is the job? Yeah, so the resume doesn't really tell you much. You can have a really polished resume, but doesn't really say anything about you.
yeah.
and you rather, I'm assuming most people in the room would rather just read a LinkedIn profile.
It's pretty much the same.
I mean, I would just.
They're already gonna do that anyways. They're gonna already cross.
Yeah, whether you tell them to or not, they're gonna look it up, right?
Like everything, it
I mean, I do
takes
the same thing.
time to
Yeah.
get over having something in front of them, though. Just like introducing this 40 years ago, people probably would have thought you were crazy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and now it's common, second nature.
Common. Yeah, it's very common. Any other questions? Questions?
I
Go
have a
ahead.
question. So when you decided to open your own business, like what was the first thing that was in your head? Like, I want to leave the corporate world, or I want to have my own business. And how did you come up with the idea of your own business? Like, was it like something that you were lacking at your current job, or absolutely not related to your job?
Yeah. So
Were you running from the job, or you just?
I
wanted to
know.
leave?
I'm going to answer the whole thing.
That's really the question. There's like, are you running from it?
So when I had gone through my coaching program, two things. One is you learn that just by sharing a goal out loud with at least one other person, your chance of achieving that goal goes up by 49%. So when I took my last job at Redfin, I said out loud, the next thing I do is I'm going to try, go out on my own as a coach. I just figured it would be 6 or 8 years or whatever. Like I stayed in all my other jobs, but average of 7 years. So I think then what happened, it was both a push and a pull. So the push was that I was down to that point where I had no time to do the coaching, even though I thought I was going to have time. Maybe that was the push and the pull, I guess. It was maybe one and the same for me. And then as far as the idea, I don't know, I think all different phases, at least in my career, like there were times when I was definitely tired and burn out, and then I think, oh, I have to quit these corporate jobs. And there were a couple different things I would think of. So I really thought of becoming a psychologist, but that was like a very long, hard road. I was just never willing to go back to school. Then I would think, well, it would be really nice to open like one of those stationery stores and serve coffee. But then I don't think I'd be good at that. Plus, I don't think I'd make any money. So the last one I had thought about was like, well, one day when I leave corporate, what if I could just be independent and maybe I could personally do HR for like a couple of small businesses or local I'm really, coffee and chocolate was always my thing. Like maybe there's some of these small coffee cafes or chocolate shops or something, and I could do their HR. So, I'd probably thought about that, maybe a decade ago. And then by the time I actually left, it was pretty funny because somehow I had really gotten very attached to this idea of HR for startups, and I didn't really have that much startup experience myself, but I was really enjoying the smaller companies. And Redfin, when I was there, was about 1,100 people. And Glenn, who's the CEO, would always talk about it as a startup. And after I started, I went to his office. I said, Glenn, you're not a startup, right? I mean, you're 1,100 people. You're like 10 years old. And he was, if you know Glenn, right? And he was kind of like, well, I know, but I like all these attributes of the startup, right? I like fast and scrappy and fail fast and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, that's cool, because those were the attributes.
Ping pong.
And ping pong and free food and all that. So I liked the attributes of the startup, and from the HR side, getting away from the bureaucracy and just doing what was needed when people needed it, and also the ability to have that quick and high impact, which I had started to miss over time. Those were just kind of all the things that came together for me, and I thought if I could put myself in a place to make that happen, that it would be really fun.
Thank you.
Piggyback on that, you talked about companies establishing a company culture. I've been a part of a lot of companies where they have a great company culture to start with, but as they scale like that and grow big, it gets lost. And some of it is trying to maintain that startup feel when they are more an enterprise company. How do you maintain that as you grow and scale throughout an organization? Or what are some, I think the traps and the pitfalls that you've seen companies fall into that have had them kind of lose their way?
Yeah. The question I have, and I know there's not an actual answer or a silver bullet, but at some size, I just fear that culture is not scalable. Like, I just have to believe that at some point you're too big. But then you have big companies, like Amazon's been really famous, regardless of whether you like their culture or not, but keeping it small, keeping the small departments, and from the beginning, Jeff had this phrase about the 2 pizza team. If you can't feed a team with 2 pizzas, the team is too big, you carve off another team. I think there's some truth in that if you're running a business that's very decentralized and you want to really empower, those decentralized teams. But keeping the culture, first of all, I think the leader has to they have to talk about it all the time. And I talk to leaders where they say, I am so tired of hearing myself talk about mission, vision, values. And I say, great, that means you're doing it, right? Because people don't remember, people have a lot going on. If you're growing, you have new people who haven't heard that message before. And if they don't hear it often enough, then it's not important and they're gonna forget. So I do think the leaders have to be the champions. I also think storytelling. So I have to use Amazon examples. I was there for 6 years, but this is a good one. I had a leader, and he would share a story about the value and what or leadership principles, as they're called, and what that meant to him, what that looked like to him, and it was just a way to connect people to the value. And if you're doing that as often as you're talking about your customers, about your metrics, about your financials, I think those are some of the best things that you can do. And rewarding people for behavior. We reward people for a lot of things. We don't always talk about behavior or reward people for behavior as much as we do for other kinds of measures.
Yeah, performance.
Whatever you call performance. And by the way, like the way, because like at Microsoft, they used to talk about people who were great at what they did but left bodies in the wake, right? So that was the so-called high performance bad behavior. But I really challenge people to say the whole person comes to work, and so performance is the whole impact that person has. It's not just because, they were a great engineer, but then they made people cry. You have to average those 2 things out, in my view, and I think really that's the way to uphold your values.
Yeah, that is great. Great just to end on that, right? That you have to be the whole person. It's not just you can't just be a great marketer and just yell at people, which happens, right? Yeah. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it and quite enjoyed it. It's always great to chat with people I admire from afar. So thanks for being Mikaela, and doing a great job.
Thanks for having me. I was
Yep.
very humbled to be invited, so
Yeah,
thank
no
you.
worries, no worries. And thank you all for coming. Thanks for braving the wonderful sunshine outside and coming indoors tonight, because I thought about not being here as well, because it was a gorgeous night outside. So thanks, and we'll see you on the second Wednesday of next month. Thanks a lot. Have a great night. Be safe.
Thank you.